Music of Berlin in the 1920s by me, Rachel Day. We would be remiss to discuss Berlin in the 1920s without talking about the Weimar Republic. This is where our story begins, and this is where Germany began before Hitler and the Nazis took over. The Weimar Republic culture, arts, and nightlife were incredibly important for intellectuals to be involved in. In fact, it's interesting to notice the similarities that the cabaret shows during the Weimar Republic had with 1920s USA at the time. When we look back on 1920s USA, we find that flappers and speakeasies were prevalent. When comparing this to Berlin in the 1920s, we notice that the cabaret shows featured dancers like flappers, and they also featured jazz music. Gebrauchsmusik, also known as music for use, was a term that was coined during the Weimar Republic era. Paul Hindemith and Karl Orff are both proponents of this idea that music was to be easily accessible to performers. Both men had a passion for composing new music and allowing this music to be readily available. Orff, as many know, became one of the most influential music educators to ever live. He developed a new way to construct the xylophone that was used for children to learn the notes of a scale. Orff was revolutionary and still is today. Another coined term during the Weimar Republic was Zeitoper, or now opera, which was an opera that alluded to jazz in some way. Sometimes this was even in a scene where the opera performers would dance the Charleston or the Foxtrot. This opera was not the same as those written by Mozart, but rather a new style altogether. Ernst Krenek was the first to combine jazz and opera, and he was doing his best to make a name for himself when he merged the two styles of music. When speaking of an opera by Franz Schreker, Alex Ross states, quote, buoyantly lyrical vocal writing, more Italian than German in style, a golden blur of orchestral sound, more Debussy than Wagner in timbre, a cosmopolitan sensualism, incorporating in the Grand Bordello sequence of Act Two, gypsy bands, barcarolles, and choral serenades, end quote. I would say that new opera has something for everyone. Of course, with any new art form, new opera received much criticism. Gestic music was a term used instead of gestus, meaning musical gesture. Kurt Weill was famous for this type of musical gesture. In my interpretation of what gestic music is, I found it to be a pivotal moment within a piece of music or larger work of music when the message shifts or changes to become something revolutionary and different. This can be a word shouted by an actor or even a prop used on stage in a scene. The Three-Penny Opera is important to note because it encompasses many of the Weimar Republic's ideas of culture and fun. Unfortunately, these, quote, fun ideas included murder, prostitution, unfortunate death, warped sex, and the list goes on. Bertolt Brecht was the writer of the Three-Penny Opera. Arnold Schoenberg is known for developing the 12-tone system. The system uses 12 tones to create, quote, new chords. The way this is done now is through a process with a matrix where the composer can use and stack notes to create chords. Schoenberg developed his 12-tone system out of what he believed was necessity. He truly desired to create new and different music, and he felt that it was composers' duties to do so. In Strunk's source readings in music history, Schoenberg states, quote, The idea that one basic tone, the root, dominated the construction of chords and regulated their succession, the concept of tonality, had to develop first into the concept of extended tonality. End quote. His idea remained that there must be more to tonality. Tonality couldn't be the end, and that was all there was. He even addresses dissonance and states, quote, this state of affairs led to a freer use of dissonances comparable to classic composers' treatment of diminished seventh chords, which could precede and follow any other harmony, consonant or dissonant, as if there were no dissonance at all. End quote. I interpret this to mean that if dissonance can be resolved, then the music still has a tonal center. Schoenberg developed a process for his new system, but reminded the learner often that the outcome will vary. This was crucial to the idea of the 12-tone system. It was not created to allow composers to sound like another composer. These are the main styles and genres of music found within the Weimar Republic of Berlin in the 1920s. Soon after, everything will change as Nazism takes effect.